So greetings from Pennsylvania once again. And once again we find ourselves in a cemetery. So I have been doing a series of videos on the French and Indian War. A couple of those videos are out already. But in the very first video that I made on the series, the Penns Creek Massacre, which occurred in October 16th of 1755, I mentioned that a number of captives were taken. I think 11 captives were taken by the Indians in that raid. And I had mentioned that we were going to do some videos about their story, and today's the day. So there was three girls that we know by name. Marie Leroy, of course, I took you to the site of the Leroy massacre there, so I'm getting adjusted here. And then there was Barbara and Regina Leininger as well. So Marie and Barbara have their own story. They were captives for 3.5 years, but Regina has a much longer story. She was captive for 9 years altogether. And there was also a little girl with her as well, which they don't know her name. But we're going to tell their stories. So why am I doing it in a cemetery? Good question, huh? So this is the Allegheny Union Cemetery here in Alleghenyville in Berks County, southern Berks County, not too far from the town of Mountain. And Barbara is supposedly buried here. Of course, she got married. Her last name was Ruffner. I do see a Ruffner tombstone back here, but these are all fairly newer. Well, compared to the Barbara I'm looking for. She was born in 1743. Of course, the massacre occurred in 1755. So we're looking for some much older tombstones. But supposedly she's buried here. So this is I thought a good place to start the video, to tell her story, her and Marie's story. Then later we'll go to where Regina is buried, Regina Leininger. And there's a little bit of controversy about her identity, but we'll talk about that when we get to her. So as I look for Barbara's tombstone, I will tell you a little bit about her story, her and Marie's captivity story. So we'll just walk around a little bit together here. Yeah, so a lot of these don't have that really old look to them, but there's a Ruffner right there. But those are too modern for what we're looking for. These dates, they go all the way up into the 1900s. So we need to find a much older section to this cemetery. So I'm gonna probably go head uphill. Alright. Alright, now this site looks a lot more promising. These look like really old tombstones. I did start this video up on the other side of the street, up the hill up that way. There's a cemetery. That's what I saw on Google Maps, but everything up there was, late 1800s into 1900s. This is the old graveyard behind the church. This is where I should have started out. Alright, yeah, because you got some really old grave markers here. Some of them are just field stones. So we'll see if we can find Barbara. I'm pretty sure she's in here somewhere. Man, this is a really awesome looking location. Alright, let's talk a little bit about Barbara and Marie, their story, as I look for this tombstone of hers. I am hoping hers has some kind of extra little plaque by it to let you know that's her, because where Regina is buried, hers does, but we'll see. So if you remember from that video of the Penns Creek Massacre, it started at the Leroy farm where Marie was. Her father was killed and a brother was taken captive, and Marie and some other little girl that was staying at their home was taken captive. And then Barbara's home, the Leininger family, her father and brother were killed, but she had her mom and her other brother were not at home at the time, and they survived. But Barbara and Regina were taken. Barbara was 12, Regina was 9, and Marie was also 12. And they were all initially taken to the same encampment where the Indians were staying while they were making these raids and these killings. But at a later time, when they traveled away, the groups were separated. Of course, the spoils, including the captives, were divvied out amongst the different Native Americans that were present. And Regina and a 2-year-old girl were separated from Barbara and Marie at this time. and Barbara and Marie were taken close to Pittsburgh, well, more up in Clearfield County first, and then to Pittsburgh. At one point, Barbara did try to escape, but her life was saved. Apparently, one of the Indians pleaded for her life, so she was not killed at the time. I think they were getting ready to set up a fire to do her in, but it didn't happen then. But that wasn't the case for some of the other captives. We'll talk about that story later. So they moved around quite a bit from camp to camp. Sometimes they had to move because the British troops were nearby, and they had to move, and then they moved back. The girls were kept busy doing chores, tanning leather and making shoes and digging up roots and acorns and all kinds of stuff. The meaningless tasks, I guess you could call it. Kind of like, forced labor. Oftentimes there wasn't a whole lot to eat for them either. Yeah, and at one point when they were staying in an Indian village named Kittanning, there was an opportunity to escape because some British troops were nearby, but they didn't take that opportunity. But several other people did, but unfortunately they were captured. Yeah, look at some of these. So I'm just looking at tombstones too. There's some really old. Not sure if I'll be able to find Barbara or not. But anyways, oh yeah, because look at all these. A lot of these don't even have writing on them. They're just field stones. Wow. I mean, this cemetery is worth visiting just by itself. Lots of old ones here. Alright, but I'm getting distracted from our story. Several people did try to escape, including a woman and later a man. And they were made an example of. The woman was tortured in a horrible way. I won't go into the details just to keep this video PG, but she was, yeah, it was pretty brutal. Same with the man. But it was done to make an example of them, to show people, hey, if you try to escape, this is going to happen to you. So that's why it was done. Alright, no luck yet, because I'm not looking as hard as I should. I'm trying to tell a story at the same time. There are some older dates here. This one, it was born in 1778. Looks like we got another a date of 1798 when they were born. Not sure if you can read that one there. But we need something older than that. I'm starting to get the feeling that Barbara's grave marker might be one of those really old stones down there that has no writing on it. But we'll keep looking. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful old graveyard there. And it got to a point where the girls realized from talk going around that the Indians they were with were thinking of heading further west, back out into the Ohio territory more. And that didn't sound too good to the girls because, that was going further into, enemy territory, I guess you could say, and would, less likely chance of them being rescued. So they took advantage of an opportunity. I think the group that they were with, the men had gone to sell pelts, the Indians that were with them, and then the girls were sent to go dig like roots and stuff. Barbara pretended to be sick, and she stayed back in some little hut by herself. And Marie, I forget wherever Marie was, she was sent back to get some dogs back at the main camp. But instead of going back to main camp, she went to meet Barbara, where Barbara was. And I think 2 other men went with them, younger men, a guy named Owen and someone named David. So the 4 of them took off together, escaped. And it was a risky thing. They knew, they didn't want to stay captives, but they knew if they got caught, they saw what had happened to the other people. So if you got caught, bad things were going to happen to you, really bad things. But they took the risk. They wanted their freedom, which you can't blame them. So they took off, and they eventually made it to the Pittsburgh area in, I think, at the end of March in 1759, I believe. Yeah, not 1759, 1758. That would be 3.5 years from 1755. And 1758 was when the Treaty of Easton was occurring. I think it's one reason why the Indians were headed out to Ohio with their captives, because I think the Treaty of Easton was going to require them to give up their captives. And they didn't want to do that. Yeah, so they made it to Pittsburgh. Was it Fort Pitt was there? And they were across the river from the fort, and they're calling for help because they were extremely tired and cold, and some of them had been injured. They had nearly drowned several times, some of the girls. So it was a rough journey, done in the wintertime. I forget how many miles, several hundred miles they traveled in their escape. Always with the chance of being recaptured. But at first, the soldiers in the fort thought it was a trap. They thought the girls were, because they were dressed up like Indians. They had the Native American clothing on or anything, so it looked like a trap. Eventually, they were convinced that they weren't. They were brought back to the fort and taken well care of then. Got new clothes and everything. Get to eat some real food for once. And eventually, because I was April 1st is when they were taken into the fort, April 1st of 1758. And eventually they were taken to Philadelphia on May 6th. They made it there. And that's where they were reunited with family. So a long 3.5 years. I still haven't found Barbara. Yeah, like I have a really strong feeling she's one of those I won't be able to read. All right, but at least I could tell her story here. She's here somewhere. Barbara Liner. Well, she's Barbara Ruffner. She did get married. Married to Peter Ruffner. She got married in 1761 and died in 1805. 62 years old, I think she was. She died of dysentery. So I'll take a few more moments to show you some of what I'm having to deal with here. Hey, look at this. I mean, this is not written in English either. This is German. So I'm trying to tell what that says. I mean, a lot of times you can still read the name, but they're extremely worn. And I know some of you are going to say you could come out here with chalk or different things, but I don't do that in these cemeteries in any way. A lot of times they don't want you coming out here and doing, rubbings and stuff or things like that. Yeah, wow, look at this. Barely legible. Well, actually, do I see Barbara there, though? Look at that. Does that say Barbara? I think that's what that says there. I'm seeing a B-A-R-B. Barbara. I think that's Barbara. Although it says Barbara, the dates don't quite match up. I think I see a 1797 down there. Her death date. This looks like a 17... Wow, is that 1733? She was born in 1743, died in 1805. So, those are close dates, but this probably isn't her, though, then. All right, well, it was encouraging. I mean, I feel like that definitely says Barbara there. All right. So there's the one that said Barbara. And then you have even ones like this, yeah. And then you have the ones that don't say anything at all. They're just a stone. Just stones in the ground. Now I'm sure there are church records that show exactly where she was buried. And here's more just upright stones. And this one looks like it had some writing on it at one point, but wow. Yeah, I can see a date on there. It looks like it says 1750 something on there. Not sure if you can make that out. Yeah, here's another one. Looks like that says 1770 at the top. Wow, that's old stones, man. I did try to look up records for Marie Leroy, and there's no indication, she got married or when she died or anything. The census records kind of ended for her. I looked up other research that people had done. I think it's assumed that she got married because the name Marie Leroy kind of disappears from the history, so she probably, when they get married, the name changes. Just isn't any record of that anywhere. Well, maybe there is, but maybe no one's found it, so not really sure where Marie ended up. Of course, this is southern Berks County. This is where Barbara ended up. All right, I'm gonna keep looking a little bit more for her. But later we'll go to the other cemetery where Regina is buried, and I'll tell you a little bit about her story as well. Her 9-year captivity. Hers is similar in a lot of ways to what I just said with the girls, just a little bit longer. For her, the story isn't going to be longer though. All right. Yeah, check out the writing on this one. It's very ornate, but wow. Good luck with interpreting that. And even up here, here's a whole nother row of just rocks. No inscriptions on them. So one of these could be Barbara as well. My shadow. Yeah, you know you're in an old graveyard when you just see stones like this. Alright, well I'm going to have to call it quits for looking for Barbara. Like I said, I almost thought we found her. That one that said Barbara. But she's in here somewhere. You can see there's areas out there even where there isn't even any gravestones. You know, there's people buried in there as well. They just don't have markers anymore. So she could be in there as well. Someone's working on some things down there. So yeah, I'm sure the church records will say exactly where she is. Not sure if those are online or not. I was kind of hoping there would be a little plaque, like a little memorial plaque by her gravestone, but there isn't, I don't believe, unless I missed it. Up here is the old church here in Alleghenyville. All right, so we're gonna say goodbye to Barbara. She's here somewhere, Barbara Leiner. Well, Barbara Ruffner was her name later on. But we're gonna head to another location here in Berks County, back closer to where I live. We're gonna head over to Stouchburg and to another old church. To a church actually where I have some of my ancestors are buried as well. Kind of a cool place. There's a lot more of these tombstones like this. They're just field stones. Let me turn you off for a moment. They got a big truck coming through there. Yeah, like I said, some of my ancestors are buried in the church we're going to as well. Some of my earliest ones that came to this country. All right, let's get back in the Jeep, head over to Stouchburg, Pennsylvania. And Regina's marker is real easy to find there. So we have made it to Stouchburg. This is the Christ Lutheran Church. This is a pretty old church as well. Actually, I filmed, this is not the old church. Back down behind that house back there was the really old church that was built in 1743. I did a video on that once. Pretty neat ruins back there. I'll try to show you some pictures of that if I can find where those are. Once again, just like the other church we're at, you have the newer cemetery, but across the way is the older cemetery. Much older cemetery. Now I have some ancestors buried in here as well. I mentioned I have filmed here several times. I think I can see Regina's grave right over there. Yeah, this is a really neat old graveyard to visit too. Right off of 422 right there between Stouchburg and Myerstown. I do want to mention though that, you know, if you want to know more about the stories of these girls, you can obviously do your own research. You know, even with Marie and Barbara's story, I gave a somewhat condensed version of that story. In the versions online, you know, they go a lot more into the different Native American villages they visited and stuff like that. I didn't want to, you know, spend half an hour telling you a story though. But like if this piques your interest, like I said, you can do your own research as well. And just be aware too that there are, when you research older stories like this, sometimes there's different versions. There are several books about these girls. There's even a movie. And if you come across those, you have to understand that in order to make a book or a movie, a lot has to be added to the story that may not necessarily actually have been a part of their story. So you might come across that as well. And also there is, I think I mentioned it earlier, there's a little bit of controversy about Regina here, her last name especially. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. Let's go ahead and check her out, her gravestone up here. Maybe look at a few of the others here. They're really cool. And then I'll tell you her story, a condensed version of it. It's similar in some ways to Barbara and Marie, but a little bit different as well. Yeah, got some, just love the old, let me check it out, the old ornate tombstones. Here's some ones with, let me check out this one. I know I've seen this one before, but the old skull and cross, well, this one says a skull. Some of skull and crossbones. Just the writing on there is just they don't make them like this anymore. And once again, So you have more of these that don't even have names on them. They're this old, just, you know, stones sticking out of the ground. I'm pretty sure some of these really old ones are my ancestors. Some of the first that came over in the 1700s. Church records say that they're buried in here somewhere, but they could be some of these stones. Or you notice, like, once again in the middle, there are no gravestones, but more than likely there are graves in there. And right here is Regina. Honoring Regina, the Indian captive placed by the Berks County. It says Regina Leiner, and it says in legend Rachel Hartman, as a small child held captive 1755 to 1763, identified by her mother's singing the hymn. That's German, I'm not gonna say it. I mean, it's a song. In English it means alone, yet not alone. Of course, I mean, that means alone, yet not alone. I think that means in the night, or something like that. Anyway, I don't speak German. But in English it just means alone, yet not alone, pretty much. And obviously this is not her original tombstone. If she did have one, it would have looked probably more like one of these out here. This may not have even been the exact spot where she was buried. They might not even know the exact spot, but most likely where these older ones are. You can see they just continue, whoops, step in a hole. They just continue on. Alright, yeah, I'm just looking around again. Let me tell you her story. I just love looking at the old ones. So I'm not going to repeat the whole story again with what happened to the other girls, but you know, mentioned how they were all captured and taken to that one main camp, and then a little later on they were all separated, you know, kind of divvied out amongst the Indians. And Barbara and Marie went one way, and then Regina, sometimes she's referred to as Rachel. Rachel would be her, you know, anglicized name of Regina. Sometimes you'll come across a Rachel Leiner. But Regina and a smaller girl, 2-year-old girl, were taken elsewhere. And they were taken further west, more into Ohio. And once again, her story is going to be similar into the hardships she faced. You know, they were not treated all that great. They're basically, you know, forced labor. You know, a lot of times they had to eat acorns and roots and stuff, as the accounts say. But at the end of the French and Indian War in 1763, a lot of the natives were not happy with the terms, and there was another war that followed in 1764 that was called Pontiac's War. Actually, I think it went from 63 to 64. Because I know that mark up there said she was held captive until 1763. I think it was actually 1764 when she was actually released. But that was called Pontiac's War. That didn't go well for the natives either. They lost that, and as a result, they had to give up all their captives that they had taken out that way towards the Ohio area. So all the captives were rounded up, I guess you could say, and they took them all. They brought them all back to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is just west of Harrisburg, the state capital. And they notified the families, you know, the ones who had lost children and relatives during the war, that, you know, a bunch of these captives had been brought back to Carlisle, and that they could go there and hopefully try to recognize their children or their relatives. But as you could guess, there were some difficulties with that. You know, in Regina's case, she had been captive 9 years. She'd been taken when she was 9, so, you know, a lot can change in 9 years in the way you look. She pretty much forgot how to speak German. That's the language they spoke here in this area back then, German. They probably knew a little bit of English as well, but German was their main language. So she, yeah, and then the other girl with her who was captured at 2, yeah, she probably didn't speak any German at all anymore. So when Regina's mom came to look for her, she didn't recognize her daughter. And we don't really know if Regina recognized her mom at all, and if she did, maybe she didn't know what to say. Because it's hard to know what kind of mental state the girl was in, obviously. I mean, yeah, who knows. But the commanding officer there suggested to Regina's mom that, is there something that you can do that might, you know, help your daughter to remember who you are? So her mom started singing that hymn, Alone Yet Not Alone. I'm not going to try to say the German name of it. But that's what she would sing to her kids when they're younger, and she started singing that, and then Regina started crying because she recognized the song, and that's when, you know, the bond was, I guess you could say, reintroduced there. They recognized each other, and all that wonderful stuff happened then. It would have been cool to see that scene, I think, to hear her mom singing, and then to see the recognition on Regina's face of who her mom was. It'd be sad too, because, you know, she was obviously not the same person she was before she was captured. But yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of difficulties, you know, they had to overcome with her being brought back into, you know, a German society rather than where she was living for the Native Americans. All right, so that is Regina's story. Oh yeah, and the little girl went with Regina. Regina's mom took the little girl in too. I guess there was just no way to figure out who her parents were, or else they didn't show up, or yeah. So they took the little girl, went with Regina, because I guess their bond was pretty strong from having been together for 9 years as captives. So cool story. So once again, here is her marker. Like I said, there is some bit of controversy about some of the information. Like, it's, for a while she was known as Regina Hartman. Like I said, that probably should be 1764 as well. Yeah, the problem is, like I said, with these older stories, there are several different versions of this. There were quite a few young girls that were kidnapped, and several were probably known as Regina, and yeah, there was some confusion with that. The problem is there were a number of different stories circulating in the area, all claiming that Regina is the Regina of their story. There probably were several girls captured that had the name Regina. And there's a story over in Lebanon County, one here in Berks County, one up in Schuylkill County, all claiming that this was their Regina. But they all use the same date for the start of her capture, her captivity, October 16, 1755. But that date is the Penns Creek Massacre. That date doesn't fit for any of the Indian raids that happened further east here in Berks and Schuylkill and Lebanon counties. So that almost definitely is Regina Liner of the Penns Creek Massacre. So you might find information online that says otherwise, but from what I've researched, that's her right there. But that's the way it is, like I said, with history and with these old stories as they get passed down. All right, turned out to be a absolutely beautiful day to do this. All right, once again, if you want to learn more about Regina's story, you can research about her online as well. Like I said before, it actually really is a neat story. Alright then, so that'll be it for this video. I did enjoy making this video, driving around and just exploring. I had never been to that other church before, and that graveyard back behind that church was pretty awesome. I might have to go back there someday. And I always love coming to this one. Like I said, I have ancestors here, buried here. Alright, as always, thanks for coming along, and I'll see you around.